today we're going to be talking about full text annotation, or as I say, or how I learned to like annotating everything, even the unannotatable. First, we're just going to mention, the sort of preliminaries. We're going to have a brief session where I torture you by asking you questions. And then we're going to talk about the last pieces that we need in order to understand how to annotate anything using FrameNet, in principle. And once we've done that, then we can move on to annotating full text, which we'll do after the break. So there are no readings for tonight, so go ahead and rejoice. You can do that. Office hours are still Tuesday, Thursday, 1:30 to 3, and as I said before, you can drop by. I don't guarantee I'll be there, but I'll probably be there. Your assignment is I'm giving you some full text annotation to try at home. In fact, it's going to be part of an in-class exercise, which you will start here, but you will definitely not finish here. So I'm going to have you take it home and give it a try. Okay? So because it's going to be so much fun, you should continue rejoicing. So the torture portion of the program. What are the criteria that we use in selecting sentences for lexicographic annotation? So Miriam has been over this in some detail before. So first of all, I'm going to try just, seeing if anybody wants to volunteer and answer. There are many pieces of this, and so there's lots of right answers. Is anyone brave enough at this early hour to raise their hand? Okay, I have something to help you think about it. So, first of all, which of these sentences should you annotate for lexicographic annotation? The first one is, did I or did I not give her one? The second one is, my mother gave the neighbor some milk. So I'm going to choose a random victim. And how about you in the back? Yeah. Which sentence, the first one or the second one, should I choose? Yes, definitely the second one. So I tried to make this very straightforward. But so why is it that you say the second one? There's several reasons. Can you give me one?
About the frame elements that
okay. Okay, what about the frame elements? That's a good start. That is definitely part.
When you have the lexer unit to the verb give, so to think about the frame elements that are instantiated.
So, can you say a little more? You're definitely on the right track.
I don't know.
Okay, can you pass the microphone to your left? Are you willing to speculate about either you with the reason she was giving, or come up with another reason?
Okay, maybe the valences. For the agent of gave. Is that it?
So I would point out that actually the valences of these two are the same.
Oh yes, the first one.
The first and the second have the same, as far as give is concerned, just give part.
Okay,
the valence is the same.
But in the second one, I don't know, they are clear. They are instantiated.
Absolutely. Right? So that's exactly one of the answers is absolutely. Are the frame elements clear? They're instantiated and clear. You know what they are. And the second one is much better for that. Now, can you pass the microphone forward? Yeah. Can you come up with another reason? There's at least one more reason. Very general.
I'm trying to think, but I still don't know.
So, in general, would you rather read the first sentence or read the second sentence? Even if you're not annotating. Which one is easier to read?
Easier to read, the second one.
Yeah, and that's...
I don't know, beyond what she said, they are instantiated and they are in an order that is canonical, I don't know.
Yes.
Or normal.
Yep. Okay, so that's again part of it. So it's not just that the fillers of the frame elements are clear, which is what I was taking you to be saying, but it's also that the order of the sentence is very normal. And now you're off the hook. So that's a good answer. And in general, all of this is about how complicated is it? And is the complexity useful? So there's complexity in the first sentence. None of it is useful. The second sentence shows exactly the same information, and it's not very complicated, so it's better. Okay, so that should be clear. All right, now we have another forced choice. Which one should we annotate? Could you pass the microphone forward again? You choose the victim among the people forward. So which sentence should we annotate? Now, this is on the assumption that we have already annotated the previous sentence. So I'll go back. So look, we've already decided to annotate the second sentence here. Okay? So given that we have that sentence, which of these two should we annotate? This is a little more difficult.
Por favor, tradução das sentenças.
O mágico deu a sua carteira para o assistente e na segunda sentença o outro professor...
Eu acredito que as duas sentenças sejam passíveis de anotação.
All right. Yeah, the two of them are possible. The two of them are possible of annotation, as she said.
Both are possible, but which is better? Okay, can you pass the microphone to somebody who's responding with you?
I think it's the first one, it's better to annotate because in the second one we have an ambiguity in the possessive pronoun his, because we don't know if the book is of the teacher, of the student, and because of this ambiguity, I would rather to annotate the first one.
Okay, I will point out that I very carefully foresaw exactly this response, and I will point out that the first one is also ambiguous in the same way. So his might refer to the magician, or it could refer to some other person in the previous discourse.
Yeah.
So that you give I actually will tell you, that was the correct answer, but your reason why is not the correct reason. So, and I'm going to give you a hint by going back to the previous slide. So I'll tell you that you cannot answer this question without remembering what we did on the previous slide. So now I'll ask you, we've mentioned this before, but what is the valence that's in the second sentence?
We have the three valences, in which we have the Someone who gives something to somebody.
Is that what it says up there?
No, someone gives somebody something.
Now look at this one.
Oh yes, the second one is more direct.
The second one is the same as what we had before. So I'm going to go ahead and answer the question now so we can move on. The answer is you don't want to annotate the second one because you already annotated it. The second one here is exactly the same as the one we previously annotated. So it's not more information. So the first one is more information because we didn't have the valence with the noun phrase theme followed by the possessor with to. Okay?
I got it, because now I understand that we must annotate different types of sentences.
Yes,
okay.
And that is a very important principle. We want, in the end, when we're doing lexicographic annotation, we want to capture the full diversity. So we ignore lots and lots of sentences in order to get as much diversity as we can. And that diversity is both for the syntax, like this one, and the diversity is for the semantic fillers. So if it's not very relevant for the giving frame, but if I was looking at another frame, let's say wearing, I would want to know that I can wear a hat and that I can also wear a shirt and all these things, because languages can be very, very particular about which verbs you use for which kinds of clothing. Okay, so you want to get maximal diversity and you want to annotate clear sentences. Those are the two principles that I wanted you to get out of this. Okay, so now the question is, why? It's a pretty straightforward question, I think. I'm going to, again, ask you, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Alexandro? Alexandro, can you pass the microphone to the person sitting next to you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why annotate?
So why annotate following those two principles? Why do we need diversity? Why do we need clarity?
Well, we need diversity to get a range of using of the language and of the frames, and the other thing is to make clear is that all places are being filled. I guess that's it.
Okay, that's not bad. The basic idea is that we want our resource to be useful. And what it's supposed to be useful for when we're doing lexicographic annotation is useful for giving people the idea of everything you can do with a particular meaning of a particular word, right? And so since we want people to understand everything you can do, that's why we need diversity. And because we want people to actually understand it, that's why we want as simple as possible. These two constraints actually compete. So I'll just point that out and not say anything more about it for now. Now, do we lose anything by following these criteria? And the answer is yes. So I wouldn't ask the question if the answer wasn't yes. But now the question is what? So can you pass the microphone to the lady next to you? So I'll change the question slightly. What do we lose when we follow these annotation principles?
Então.
So, I think that when you choose these criteria to... Oh, let me think a bit. When you choose this criteria... Eu não estou escutando o que ela está falando, gente. O microfone está muito ruim. The mic, yeah, we're not listening to her, sorry. When we choose criteria, you somehow exclude different things that each sentence can have. In doing something more unified, possibly we could achieve what you want. Because the sentences are different.
Yeah, so that's a good answer, thank you. And I would say, just to elaborate a little bit on your answer, to put it simply, we're throwing away a lot of sentences, right? And those sentences represent diversity. Now, some of that diversity is meaningless diversity, but also some of that diversity, like context. And in fact, if I go back to the first sentence that we threw away because it's too complicated, well, it turns out that most sentences are about that complicated if you actually look in a corpus. So that means that we're limiting ourselves a lot when we try to find nice, clear, simple, non-passive sentences with all the frame elements instantiated, right? That's a lot of requirements, and suddenly you end up with almost nothing to annotate. And so then that means you lose some of the diversity. And also, you don't get any idea of how frequent the different patterns are. You only know that the person annotating was able to find some clear examples for each of the patterns that are there. But you don't know whether one of the patterns is 99% of the data and the other pattern is 1%. Because since our goal is diversity, we don't spend a lot of time annotating the same kind of sentence. That would be, from this point of view, wasted time. But from other points of view, this is not wasted time. Okay, end of torture session. So breathe a sigh of relief. You can rejoice again if you want. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the last frontiers of annotation. So there's still some things that you guys haven't learned about annotation, and we're going to try to go through the remaining ones now. First of all, we haven't talked about modification structures at all. So that's pretty important. A lot of the structure in language is modification structures. And that's especially things like adjectives, prepositions, and adverbs. And also you have nouns in special circumstances. Furthermore, because we cannot find really amazingly clear examples that have sufficiently simple syntax all the time, we also need to know how to annotate some more complicated things. This is going to be more true when we move on to full text annotation, because there you have no choice about the syntax. You're just going to annotate whatever you find in the text that you've chosen, or in your unfortunate case, the text that I have chosen. The basic idea is that relative clauses are really common, and we have a special annotation for them. Also, unfortunately, discontinuous frame elements are pretty common, and so you need to be able to handle both of those cases. So what do I mean by modification structures? Just to really, really amazingly basic. I mean things like when an adjective target is with a noun. Now, it could be, in Portuguese, it could be on the left side or the right side. That doesn't matter. I'm not meaning anything by the order. But the idea is things like, you know, red balloon. Very simple stuff. Then you have nouns with nouns. You have structures with numbers. Numbers are always in a modification relation of some kind. You have adverbs and you have prepositions. First of all, adjectives, because that's sort of the center of category for modifiers. Most adjectives alternate between predicative, which the name means that they predicate like verbs, and attributive, which means they're modifiers. So adjectives used predicatively are things that fill the predicate Like this sentence, your brother is really thin. So if you think about that for a second, you can see that thin is saying something about your brother. And you can say that your brother is the external argument of that. So it's really going to work the same way as for verbs. And in fact, in many languages, adjectives and verbs are not really very distinct for exactly this reason. The attributively used adjectives, which are really common, are adjectives that go directly together with the noun. And in that case, they're not predicates. So things like strong drink sometimes helps. Not that this is a recommendation, but sometimes. So just to continue a little bit, here you can see that I'm making very explicit how you should annotate adjectives. They work like verbs, except that they have supports most of the time. In order to predicate, they need something else to join them together with their subject. Now, in the first two cases, there's an explicit support. So the first case has the verb be, and you have the subject of the verb be is provided as the subject of the adjective. That's the most normal, very simple case. But the second case is not uncommon either. So in this case, you have a causative verb, and its direct object is provided as a subject of the adjective. The third case we'll talk about more when we hit the constructicon portion. Because in the third case, there's no explicit word that is doing the job of connecting up the subject with the adjective. Instead, this is what is called a depictive. And there's a construction that puts together adjectives with a sentence and gives a special meaning to it. So in this case, she greeted me green and nauseous means that at the time when she was greeting me, but perhaps no other time, she was green and nauseous. Okay? So I'm pretty sure this doesn't exist in Portuguese, which is why I'm explicating a little bit. But in English, this is also very important, especially if you're annotating literature. Okay, attributive adjectives are really straightforward. Tiago, can we pass the microphone to...
So, the case of predicative adjective.
Should I go back?
Yeah, it would be good. Okay. So, okay. In the case of predicative adjectives, the question is, of course, green instantiates a frame element of this frame of, I don't know, quality or something like
color.
Green, color.
Well, it's different frames. These are not all the same frame.
But for the first one, that horse was green.
Yeah.
It's color, correct?
That's the color frame, yeah.
So you just said that in this case, adjectives behave similar to verbs.
That's right.
So in this sense, would we say that the frame element color would be incorporated to the lexical unit?
That's exactly right.
Okay, so it's not denotation. It's incorporation.
Yes, and in fact it would have to be because if it were denotation, then as I'm going to show in a little while, denotation, when you put it together with the verb to be, transfers its denotation predicatively to the subject. And whatever you can say about the horse is green, you don't mean the horse is the color green.
Okay, it's just check.
Yep.
Okay.
It's incorporation. Very good. Okay. So just to read one example, if you say that's the stupidest thing that I've ever heard, then stupidest and I'm ignoring the superlative for the moment because it's irrelevant for these purposes, stupidest modifies thing. Okay? Now let's talk about some special structures with nouns. We'll start with what we've already talked about. So event and state nouns, which are nouns that denote the same kinds of things as verbs denote. Well, they're annotated pretty much like verbs. They usually have plenty of frame elements, and they often have a subject along with a support, and it really ends up looking the same as verbs. So I took a short break where I am the person who is not working, and I'm the subject of break, effectively. You need take as your support in that case. Other nouns, which are not entity, which are not event or state nouns. These other nouns are usually things which denote entities. Normally, they're annotated with an entity frame element of some kind that indicates what they denote. So we talked about this a couple times. So if I say, you should tell your brother, then brother denotes the frame element alter. It's a terrible frame, the kinship frame, but these are traditional terms, alter and ego, for the two different frame elements. And so we decided to go with tradition, especially because it's not easy to know what you should name those two frame elements. At any rate, the thing that's clear is that the actual person who is kin to something else receives the frame element on that noun, and that makes sense. You will also assign a frame element to your, but that's irrelevant for our purposes now. Okay? Now, what we haven't talked about is predicative noun targets. So when you have a sentence like, I am your brother, Luke. Slightly wrong, but never mind. The point is that that same frame element that we had assigned to brother in the case before, right? So the same frame element alter that we assigned to brother in the case of you should tell your brother, if you look on the bottom sentence there, I am your brother, Luke, you see that I am annotated with the frame element alter. Does this make some sense? The same person who is the brother is I. So whatever qualities are involved in being a brother, those qualities are predicated of I in a case like this, okay? So it's a little weird, but we're quite sure that this is the right way to do it. And you see that in such a case that you assign the grammatical function external to the subject in a case like that. And you need the copula support, okay? Now we have some even ickier stuff. So pseudo-positives, and well, you can ask, what the heck is that? So the easiest way to say it is to look at the examples. So if you have a sentence like President Ng said the same, then there's a frame for president. It's a leadership frame. And you can see that intuitively, president is not actually the semantic head of President Ng. Basically, you're saying this guy named Ng, who happens to be president, that guy said the same thing, okay? And so in such a case, we say that president actually assigns its frame element to the name Ng. And we have a very special grammatical function, a positive, which applies just to this case. And you can see that the case with you should talk to my friend Seppo is handled the same way. So it's not only about things that are used as titles, But there's lots and lots of things which you could call honorary titles if you wanted to, but it's very weird to say that titles can have possessives. So I don't know how well this works in Portuguese, if at all. If it does, then you would have to do something like this. If it doesn't, well, then you have a simpler language in this regard, and you'll have other problems elsewhere. So they are distinct from what are called true appositives. So things like Seppo, my friend from Finland hates jazz. So you can sort of see that in that case, for one thing, the intonation is completely different. And for another thing, the first word, Seppo, is actually the semantic head in this second kind. So I'm basically just saying Seppo hates jazz. And I'm giving you some extra information. Whereas in the first case, I'm basically saying this guy named said the same. Oh yeah, he's also the president. Okay? And in the third example, in which the target is the other member of the true appositive, we don't annotate anything at all. So in the first, in true appositives, we actually say that the appositive element predicates just as if there was the verb to be sitting there. Again, this is a construction, right? So this subject of friend is supplied by the construction. And all the same cases that you could use with be, you can use this way. In the last case, we don't annotate anything other than brother. So this is the same as the first case I was giving you, because brother is not predicating of metal fan. Metal fan is predicating of brother, so that actually in the subject of hate, in this last sentence, you end up piling up all the frame elements all in one place. So the subject of hate is both a fan and my brother.
So just to sum up, we would annotate my brother the same way we annotated Seppo in the sentence above, if we were annotating for the target fan.
Correct.
Correct? Then we'll call it external and describe probably the frame element fan. I assume there would be such a frame element in this frame, and metal fan, some, I don't know, thing the person likes or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, so this may not be clear yet. You may have to look at this again, but that's why we're uploading the videos and the slides. If you have to look at it again, that's okay. Certainly, we didn't come up with this analysis all in one day, so it wouldn't be that surprising if you can't learn it all in one day. And there will be cases, at least I intend for there to be cases in the full text annotation. Yes. Okay, so then prepositions. These are blessedly easy in comparison to what we've just been talking about. So they're like adjectives in that they can be predicative or modifying. So here you can see the cactus is by my door. That the preposition by, specifying a location, well, it actually is making, it has my cactus as its external. That should be intuitively clear, because my cactus is filling the theme frame element. It's the thing which is located. They can also be used as modifiers. So if I say, we chatted by my door, it's sort of tempting to just say that by is predicating of we. But let's just say this. Let me give you a slightly more complicated example that I probably should have put up there. If I say that Maid Marian killed her dinner guests in the dining room, you need to know that actually all of that is in the dining room. So Maid Marian needs to be in the dining room. The guest should be in the dining room. The killing should be in the dining room. So actually, in that case, we will annotate the preposition as modifying the entire sentence. Hopefully this makes intuitive sense. This is more obvious when you think about time. So if you think about a preposition introducing time, so things like Maid Marian killed the dinner guests after dinner, which is only polite, I think, then you can see that it's really the whole thing that after is describing, not the dinner guests, not Maid Marian, not just the action, but the whole thing. Okay? So one thing to point out that's amazingly straightforward is that prepositions almost always have an object. And we annotate it just the way that we would the object of a verb. So my cat is under the hat. The hat is just an object of under. Okay? But it's not the case that every preposition in English in all situations has a direct object. If it's like, if you guys in Portuguese act like the Spaniards do, then you probably don't have this problem as much, but I know you have it at least some. So in English, I can say put $20 in, and then one of the frame elements of in is missing. And it's actually definite null instantiation, right? I cannot say that unless I've already mentioned the thing that you're putting it in. So I have to, show you a hat or something like that, and you need to know that it's there, and then I can say put $20 in. Okay? So just to talk about the two uses of prepositions in detail, when prepositions are predicative, you can see that it works just the way you'd expect. My cat is the external of under, and you have a support. In the case of modifying prepositions, it's a little bit surprising to people the first time to see an entire sentence sitting as the grammatical function head. But this works exactly the same way as an adjective modifying a noun. And so we assign the same grammatical function. Okay? Adverbs are always modifying. Woohoo! Something really simple. So, of course, that means that you have grammatical function head on whatever it is they modify. You can have questions about exactly which chunk it is that they are modifying. So I see Thiago's eyes narrowing, which may mean that he's wondering whether slowly should modify only happen. And that is a possibility.
In fact, Thiago's eyes are saying something different. The thing is that in Portuguese, and I think it's true to English as well, you can say he spoke relatively to that. Mm-hmm. Some adverbs take also complements.
Yes.
Dependents, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
So the only grammatical function we would have is not going to be had. Mm-hmm. We can have also dependent for its preposition phrase.
That's correct.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay.
So they can take complements, and when they do that, they work just like anything else that takes complements.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But they're not special in any way with that. But they never have an external. Mm-hmm. That's the only point.
Okay. They have a head.
They have a head.
Okay.
Okay. Numbers, also always modifying. So as targets, you can see that the noun chickens in 3 chickens died. Chickens is the head, the modified head. Now, we also have the terrible situation that in English and also in Spanish, that you can omit the head completely, and we call that constructional null instantiation. So if I say 3 died, then that's something you can do with any number. And in fact, in the case of Spanish, you can do it with any adjective. So if you omit the head in a case like that, well, that frame element is constructionally null instantiated. Okay? Or at least that's how Spanish FrameNet decided to do it. Also, as frame element fillers, there's special grammatical functions and phrase types for numbers because they appear in special positions and act in special ways. So 2 in add 2 cups of milk before baking. 2 fills a frame element of cup. And it has the grammatical function quant and would have the phrase type num. Okay, now we come to special constructions. And I warn you that relative clauses are terrible and evil, but there's really no way to make them any simpler than they are because they're not simple, fundamentally. That's why approximately half of all linguistic theory that's ever been published relates to relative clauses and things like that. Okay. So, because in FrameNet we have particular goals, this means that we actually have to pay attention to this problem. So, if you look at the first example, the person that I talked to said no. You can see that in yellow that you get the semantic information of that frame element of talk. Right? So talking should be done to a sentient entity, right? Probably a person. So this is, you know, a good example that shows what kind of entity is the addressee. However, this piece is outside the maximal projection of talk. And furthermore, it doesn't even include the syntactic information. So you can see that the person that I talked to, well, you need this preposition to in English in order to introduce the addressee with talk. And if you just annotated person, that would also be wrong. So in the end, we end up needing to annotate both pieces. But they give different information, as you see here. One piece is going to give you more of the semantics of the filler, and one piece is going to give you more of the syntax. And so we have different labels for these things. You can see that the same thing happens in the other examples. So because the semantic info is outside the maximal projection, we use a label antecedent to mark it. Because we don't want people who are doing syntactic parsing to think that we don't know how syntax works. And in fact, if you want to align, this was actually a serious problem because we did it differently in the beginning. And we had huge numbers of people more or less phoning us up constantly. And their only comment was, you guys screw up relative clauses. So yes, we know how syntax works. And we annotate this just for the semantic information. And in order to indicate that it's not actually part of the maximal projection, we use the label antecedent to indicate that it's actually what the frame element goes back to. Okay? And you can see that this is a label that's on the other layer, and we apply it to the whole phrase. Whatever phrase is the same as the relativizer. So you can see that for the first sentence, basically, I talked to that person. And so you can see that that person is the piece that I should annotate this way. We also annotate the relativizer, just the relativizer, not the whole relative phrase, to indicate what piece you would have to semantically identify with the antecedent. So this is most relevant. So in the first two examples, that is the whole fronted phrase, and it's also the relativizer. But if you look at the third example, I could not find the tree around which I'd tied the string. This is not the most usual way of doing relative clauses in English, but it is the most usual way of doing relative clauses in most reasonable and rational languages. And in that case, we just annotate which as the relative. And you can see that that's the same semantically identified as the tree. Okay? One more terrible thing to say about the relative clauses. We annotate all the pieces, and in English there can easily be 3, with the same frame element, grammatical function, and phrase type. So that's pretty straightforward, but you just need to know that. Okay? This is actually necessary because, believe it or not, you can have multiple fronted elements, and so you want to know which piece belongs to which piece. Now we come to yet more terribleness, which I'm going to be very brief about, and there's a lot more that could be said about this. And if you have questions about it, you can come to office hours. It comes up less often, so I don't feel as much of a need to emphasize it as with relative clauses. But there are several different kinds of discontinuous frame elements. So here you can see that the comparative and the superlative very frequently introduce a discontinuous degree element. Quotations, very frequently the quotation part, the message, is discontinuous. And we have the other half of all syntactic papers, discounting the 1% on other interesting stuff, which is about fronting. And a few other type of phenomena like that, which we actually treat all in the same way, which is why I can say etc. And here you can see my neighbors I never talk to. And both my neighbors and to are part of the same, so to speak, discontinuous phrase. Did you have a question, Thiago? Or?
Yes. In Portuguese, we have some kind of relative clause that is called relativa copiadora or copy maker relative clause. Translated into English, it would be something like my neighbors that I never talked to them.
Yep.
Ok? Meus vizinhos que eu nunca falei com eles. Yep. Acho que todo mundo já ouviu isso, né, alguma vez na vida. Os meus vizinhos que eu nunca falei com eles. So, in fact, we would have to assign the same grammatical function, phrase type, and frame element to my neighbors, that, and with them, or to them.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Just to make clear, the grammatical function and the phrase type assigned are the ones assigned in regards to the sentence in which the target is. So it's the phrase type and the grammatical function assigned by talk.
Correct.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay.
So here you can actually see that we have, unfortunately, 3 different annotation policies for these things. There are good reasons for this that I'm not going to go into. So in the case of the comparative and superlative, we actually have everything is the same grammatical function, FE, phrase type, except that, same grammatical function and same FE, but not the same phrase type. So here you can see that more, as a degree frame element, is assigned the phrase type adverb phrase, because that's what more is. And then we knew is assigned the phrase type sub, meaning subordinate clause. In the case of quotations, both pieces are assigned the grammatical function head. Because actually, in effect, whenever you have what are called parenthetical quotative markers or parenthetical cognitive markers, effectively, all they're doing is just sort of saying, what kind of information is this that I'm embedded in? So they're kind of, in a way, modifiers of the whole sentence. And we have reasons for believing that that's the right analysis, which I won't go into. Then, in the case of fronting, it works just the same as relative clauses. However many pieces we have, we annotate with the same frame element, grammatical function, phrase type. And we expect syntax to take care of how this discontinuity works. When I say that, I mean something different than if a generativist said it. What I mean is we plan to write the constructions that do that, okay? All right. Before we move on, I think it's time for a break.